The late afternoon heat was suffocating. The air conditioning in Rachel's house had been broken for 2 days, and she was at her limit. The ceiling fan in the living room did little more than push the hot air around, and her patience was wearing thin. She was irritated, sweaty, and, above all, bored. Rachel was 33 years old, a striking woman with sharp features, a well-maintained body, and an energy that starkly contrasted with the monotony her married life had become. Her husband, Eric, was a hard-working, decent man, but predictable. 8 years of marriage had turned what was once passion into a functional routine. He left early for work, came home exhausted, ate dinner in silence while watching TV, and went to bed early. Sex had become an occasional, almost bureaucratic event. That Friday morning, Eric left as usual, without much conversation. Rachel spent the day mindlessly scrolling through her phone, watching TV shows that failed to hold her attention, and drinking ice water to cool down. She decided to take a cold shower and, wrapped only in a towel, went to the kitchen to grab some ice from the freezer. That's when she heard the fire alarm blaring. Panic hit instantly. She rushed to the living room and saw smoke coming from the electrical panel. The strong smell of burning plastic quickly spread. She tried to shut off the main breaker but wasn't sure how. In her panic, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher remained calm and assured her that a team was on the way. She stepped out onto the porch, still in her towel, feeling her heart pounding. The heat from the electrical fire mixed with the heat of her own body. When she heard the sirens, relief washed over her. Within seconds, 2 firefighters jumped down from the truck and entered the house with practiced efficiency. One of them, tall, strong, his uniform clinging to his sweat-dampened body, quickly greeted her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his eyes still scanning the smoke-filled room. She nodded silently. The second firefighter, younger but just as fit, brushed past her without a word and went straight to check the electrical panel. Within 10 minutes, the situation was under control. The short circuit had been isolated, and the fire risk eliminated. As the tension faded, Rachel became aware of the 2 men standing in her living room, looking at her. That's when she realized her situation. She was still wearing only a towel. An awkward silence settled over the room. The firefighters exchanged a quick glance but remained professional. The taller one removed his helmet, revealing damp, tousled hair. "Do you have someone to check the wiring?" he asked in a firm tone. Rachel hesitated. Her usual electrician wouldn't be available until Monday. She glanced at the 2 men, evaluating the situation. They seemed completely at ease, almost comfortable in the thick, heavy air of the room. "Not yet, but I'll figure something out," she answered, running a hand over the back of her neck. The second firefighter smirked slightly, so subtle it was almost imperceptible. His gaze was different. Rachel felt something stir deep in her chest, not fear, not relief, but something else entirely, something raw, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The first firefighter cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "If you need help, our contact is on the incident report," he said, his voice professional, but his eyes lingering on her. Rachel nodded. The room suddenly felt even hotter. The 2 men walked out, leaving behind something indescribable. She stood there, frozen, the towel sticking to her skin, her heart racing faster than it should. She took a deep breath and, without realizing it, bit her lower lip lightly. It wasn't fear. It wasn't relief. It was something else. And it was far from over. Saturday dragged on slowly. Rachel spent the day trying to ignore the thoughts that kept creeping into her mind. But the image of the firefighters, the way they had looked at her, their strong bodies inside those fitted uniforms, kept coming back in unexpected waves. She tried distracting herself by cleaning the house, went out for a walk in the late afternoon, but nothing seemed enough to silence what she was feeling. The heat wasn't helping either. The ceiling fan spun lazily as she lay on the couch, her phone in hand. Her fingers hovered over the screen until she found the saved number from the incident report. She hesitated, ran her tongue over her lips. Her breathing was faster now, and not because of the heat. Before she could overthink, she typed a quick message. "Hey, this is Rachel, from yesterday's incident. I need help with the wiring. Could you recommend someone?" Seconds later, the reply came. "We can stop by and take a look. We're nearby." Her heart jumped. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Rachel opened the door, and there they were, this time without their helmets, their uniforms partially unbuttoned due to the heat. The taller one smirked slightly. "Hey, Rachel." She stepped aside to let them in, catching the scent of sweat mixed with the woody aroma of their uniforms. She closed the door slowly. The fan rotated lazily in the stifling living room. The silence stretched as one of them examined the electrical panel while the other simply watched Rachel, his gaze saying more than words ever could. "It's really hot in here," the younger one remarked, running a hand over the back of his neck. "I think we might need to stay a while to figure this out." Rachel felt the tension in the air. She moved slowly, aware of their eyes following her every motion. "Would you like something to drink? I have cold beer." "We'd take one," the taller one replied, pulling out a chair. "But I think we need to talk about something else first." His gaze locked onto hers, direct, unflinching. The younger one smirked, crossing his arms. Rachel realized there was no need for words. What was in the air was obvious, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't want to resist it. The heat was unbearable. But suddenly, it had nothing to do with the weather. The conversation stretched on. The beers sat untouched, warming as their looks said more than any words could. Rachel crossed her legs, fully aware of the eyes tracing her body. The firefighters weren't even trying to hide it anymore. The desire between them no longer needed explanation. And then, the thin line between hesitation and action was crossed. She didn't think about her husband. She didn't think about what would come after. She just let herself go. The next morning carried a different weight. Rachel woke up to the lingering scent of sweat and beer in the air. She sat up slowly, her head still foggy. Looking around, she took in the silence of the house. Her body betrayed the events of the night before. Every sensation, every glance exchanged, every touch was imprinted on her skin. But reality hit like a punch to the stomach. She got up carefully, making her way to the kitchen. Pouring herself a glass of water, she realized her hand was shaking. Guilt started seeping through the remnants of pleasure. Rachel wasn't naive. She knew exactly what she had done. She knew none of it had been an accident. Her phone buzzed. "Good morning. Last night was incredible. Need anything?" She stared at the screen for long seconds before blocking the number and tossing the phone onto the table. Taking a deep breath, she tried to gather her thoughts. She needed to pull herself together before Jake got home. But he came back sooner than expected. The sound of keys in the lock made her stomach turn. She spun around quickly, trying to act normal. Jake walked in, tossing his bag onto the couch. His eyes met hers for a moment before scanning the room, as if sensing something was off. Maybe it was. The scent in the air, the charged energy. "You're acting weird," he said, frowning. "Did something happen?" Rachel opened her mouth to respond but hesitated for just a second. 1 second too long. Jake's gaze sharpened. "Rachel." His tone shifted, suspicious, then something sharper. Her heartbeat pounded in her chest. The words were stuck in her throat. Was the game over? Did he know? Or was it just paranoia eating away at her? Jake dropped his keys onto the table and studied her closely. The silence between them was brutal, stretching endlessly. Then, suddenly, he looked away and shook his head. "You know what? Forget it. I'm just tired." He sighed and headed toward the shower. Rachel stood there, frozen. The weight of her betrayal loomed over her, but what scared her most wasn't the guilt. It was the fact that, even after everything, she still didn't fully regret it. And that thought terrified her more than anything else.